Dr. Sarah Chen's morning began with a text message that made her spill her coffee all over her pristine white lab coat. IOGNT. Jupiter delivered to palace. Wrong room. Queen arriving soon. Come now. The London Zoo's most celebrated resident, a 400-pound Western lowland gorilla named Jupiter, was supposed to be safely settled in the palace's specially prepared ground floor suite. Instead, through a series of miscommunications and an overeager transport team, he had somehow ended up in the Queen of Denmark's diplomatic quarters. Sarah's mind raced through dozens of scenarios as her taxi wound through London's morning traffic, none of them ending well for her career or international relations. Of all the days, she muttered, checking her watch for the 5th time in 2 minutes. The palace had been in a frenzy preparing for the Danish Queen's arrival, and Sarah's team had been granted a small window to move Jupiter while the royal wing underwent security preparations. Now, that carefully orchestrated plan had imploded spectacularly. The taxi screeched to a halt at the palace gates, where Sarah was met by a visibly anxious junior handler, Tommy Phipps. "They won't let me in to help," he blurted out, running alongside her. "Something about insufficient security clearance. Jupiter's been up there for 20 minutes already." Sarah flashed her emergency clearance badge at the guards, her heels clicking rapidly against the polished marble floors as she navigated the palace's labyrinthine corridors. Her mind flashed back to Jupiter's behavioral training sessions. While he was arguably the most intelligent gorilla she'd ever worked with, he also had an unfortunate fascination with shiny objects and a particular talent for mimicry that often landed him in trouble. A burst of activity ahead made her heart skip. Palace staff were hurrying in all directions, their faces tense. Through fragments of rushed conversations, Sarah caught something about a security alert in the West Wing. "Please, not now," she whispered, picking up her pace. As she rounded the final corner, a red light began pulsing silently along the corridors. Sarah recognized it from her security briefing. The palace's new automated defense system was activating. She had exactly 90 seconds before all security doors would seal automatically. The corridors stretched before her like a golden maze. Third door on the right? No, fourth. Sarah's lungs burned as she sprinted, her security badge swinging wildly around her neck. Through the open door ahead, she caught a glimpse of movement, a massive dark figure examining something sparky and decidedly expensive-looking. The warning siren began its ominous wail just as Sarah reached the doorway. Her eyes widened in horror as she took in the scene. Jupiter, magnificent and entirely too comfortable, was delicately holding up a priceless tiara to the light. The bed's canopy had been partially dismantled, the curtains fashioned into what appeared to be a makeshift swing, and several pieces of royal jewelry were arranged in a precise line across a Louis XIV desk. The security doors began their ponderous movement just as Sarah heard footsteps approaching from the connecting royal apartment. She had a split-second choice: dive in or stay out. With a silent prayer to whatever deities watched over zoologists in crisis, she lunged forward through the narrowing gap. The heavy doors sealed with a pneumatic hiss, and Sarah found herself in what could only be described as the world's most expensive standoff. Queen Margrethe EU of Denmark stood regally by her writing desk, one hand frozen in the act of removing her gloves, while Jupiter, still adorned in the Queen's pearls, had moved on to investigating a crystal perfume bottle with the focused attention of a master jeweler. "Your Majesty," Sarah managed to squeak out, attempting an awkward curtsy while simultaneously trying to position herself between the monarch and the gorilla. "I can explain." "Fascinating," the Queen interrupted, her accent crisp and her tone surprisingly calm. "I've seen many unusual things in my 70 years, but I must say, finding a gorilla arranging my jewelry collection by color and size is quite unprecedented." She paused, studying Jupiter with genuine curiosity, and doing a remarkably thorough job of it, I might add. Sarah blinked, her carefully prepared crisis management script evaporating. Jupiter, sensing he was the topic of conversation, set down the perfume bottle with exquisite care and proceeded to straighten his borrowed pearls in a gesture so remarkably similar to the Queen's own habitual movement that a startled laugh escaped Sarah's lips. The moment was interrupted by a sharp crackle from the room's intercom. "Your Majesty," Dr. Chen, a tense voice announced, "we're dealing with a Level 2 security situation. The lockdown protocols will remain in effect for at least 3 hours. We've also detected some irregularities with the room's environmental controls." As if on cue, a bead of sweat rolled down Sarah's forehead. The temperature was definitely rising, and with it, her concerns about Jupiter's comfort. A hot, stressed gorilla in a room full of priceless artifacts and a member of European royalty was not a scenario covered in her training manual. "Well then," the Queen said briskly, removing her jacket, "we might as well make the best of it. Dr. Chen, perhaps you could introduce me properly to our magnificent friend? I'm particularly interested in his evident appreciation for Baroque pearls." Before Sarah could respond, Jupiter had already begun what appeared to be an impromptu fashion show, parading past the full-length mirror while testing different head tilts to better display the pearls. The Queen's eyes twinkled with amusement, but Sarah noticed she was also subtly moving valuable items out of reach, a practiced diplomat even in the most unusual circumstances. "Your Majesty," Sarah began again, her professional training kicking in. "Jupiter is actually one of our most." She stopped mid-sentence as the lights flickered ominously and the temperature climbed another noticeable degree. Jupiter paused his preening to give the ceiling a concerned look, then did something that made both women gasp. He picked up a delicate lace fan from the dresser and, with perfect gentlemanly poise, began to fan the Queen. The three unlikely companions stared at each other, the absurdity of their situation hanging in the increasingly warm air. A queen, a zoologist, and a jewelry-loving gorilla trapped together in a slowly overheating royal bedroom. And somewhere in the palace, an unknown security threat was unfolding. As the afternoon sun blazed through the tall windows, the room had become uncomfortably like a greenhouse. Sarah's zoologist training screamed warnings about the dangers of overheating for a gorilla Jupiter's size, but the great ape seemed more concerned about his companions than himself. He had systematically gathered every fan-like object in the room, arranging them in a careful circle around the Queen's sitting area. "Remarkable," Queen Margrethe murmured, accepting a glass of water from Sarah while watching Jupiter delicately adjust a cooling arrangement of damp tapestries. "In 50 years of royal duties, I've never had a more attentive courtier." A crackle from the intercom interrupted them. "Your Majesty, we've identified multiple security breaches in the East Wing. The temperature control malfunction appears deliberate. We strongly advise." The communication cut off with an ominous burst of static. Sarah noticed Jupiter's behavior change instantly. The gorilla's playful demeanor vanished as he moved with purposeful grace to the window, his keen eyes scanning the palace grounds below. Years of behavioral research had taught Sarah to read his body language, and what she saw now sent a chill down her spine, despite the heat. "He spotted something," she whispered to the Queen, who had already adopted a more alert posture. "Jupiter has better visual acuity than humans, especially for detecting movement." The Queen stood smoothly, years of crisis management evident in her calm demeanor. "Then we shall trust his instincts." "Dr. Chen, I believe it's time to put your expertise to more strategic use." Over the next hour, they developed an unlikely collaboration. The Queen, drawing on her military background, sketched out the palace's security protocols on expensive stationery. Sarah translated Jupiter's increasingly agitated gestures, interpreting his warnings about movement in the gardens below. Jupiter, meanwhile, had created an ingenious system of signals, using the room's crystal glasses and water, detecting vibrations that suggested activity in the surrounding walls. When the temperature reached its peak, the Queen revealed a hidden wall panel containing emergency supplies, including, to Sarah's amazement, a box of premium Danish chocolates. "One must always be prepared," she explained, sharing the treats among them. Jupiter accepted his piece with impeccable manners, though his attention never wavered from his self-appointed guard duty. As dusk approached, their unlikely bond deepened through necessity and shared purpose. The Queen taught Sarah traditional Danish military hand signals, which Jupiter picked up with remarkable speed. Sarah shared techniques for staying cool in crisis situations, both physical and mental. Jupiter, displaying unexpected depths of emotional intelligence, seemed to sense when either of his companions needed encouragement, offering gentle gestures of support. Then, just as they were adapting to their strange new normal, Jupiter suddenly stiffened. His massive form went completely still, eyes fixed on a specific point outside the window. The Queen and Sarah exchanged glances, their earlier levity evaporating. Whatever their gentle giant had spotted, it was clear their ordeal was far from over. The security team burst through the doors at precisely midnight, only to freeze at the unprecedented tableau before them. Jupiter stood protectively by the window, still wearing his beloved pearls, while the Queen of Denmark and Dr. Chen huddled over a makeshift situation map crafted from chocolate wrappers and crystal perfume bottles. "Your Majesty," the head of security began, "we've apprehended 3 intruders in the East Garden," Queen Margrethe finished calmly, "and 2 more attempting to access the private gallery through the old servants' corridor." She gestured to Jupiter, who was making a series of precise hand signals. "Our friend here has been keeping us well informed of their movements. I believe you'll find their equipment cache behind the 3rd topiary, beneath the Mozart statue." The security team's stunned silence was broken only by the sound of confirmations coming through their radios. Every detail the Queen had mentioned was exactly correct. Sarah couldn't help but smile as she watched their expressions shift from confusion to awe, especially when Jupiter ceremoniously handed over a piece of paper on which he'd helped them sketch out the intruders' positions. The story exploded across global media within hours. Palace security footage, released with the Queen's permission, showed remarkable scenes. Jupiter using sophisticated object arrangements to map out threat locations, the Queen demonstrating military hand signals, and Sarah translating Jupiter's warnings into actionable intelligence. The would-be thieves, it turned out, had planned to use the Danish Queen's visit as cover for stealing priceless artifacts, never expecting their scheme to be foiled by an impromptu coalition of royalty, science, and primate intelligence. But it was the smaller, more personal moments that truly captured the public's imagination. Jupiter's gentle insistence on fanning the Queen during the worst of the heat, Sarah teaching them both simple gorilla greeting gestures, the Queen sharing family stories using the room's paintings as visual aids, with Jupiter displaying remarkable comprehension and emotional responses. The aftermath brought unprecedented changes. Queen Margrethe, impressed by Jupiter's diplomatic capabilities, arranged for a permanent cultural exchange program between Danish royal museums and primate research centers. Sarah received funding for a groundbreaking study on primate intelligence in crisis response, with Jupiter as her star participant. The knighting ceremony made history, the first time a gorilla had received a royal honor. Jupiter attended in a specially crafted ceremonial sash, insisting, through Sarah's translation, on wearing both his new medals and the Queen's pearls, which she had gifted to him. He maintained perfect composure throughout the ceremony, breaking protocol only once to offer the Queen a tissue when she grew emotional during her speech about unexpected friendships and the many forms of intelligence. Today, visitors to the London Zoo can observe Jupiter in his expanded habitat, complete with a Danish-designed royal apartment section, where he regularly hosts diplomatic tea parties. The Queen remains a frequent visitor, often bringing foreign dignitaries to meet the gorilla who proved that wisdom, grace, and nobility know no species barrier. As for Sarah, she now holds the unique position of primatological diplomatic liaison, bridging the worlds of wildlife science and international relations in ways she never imagined possible. The security system that had malfunctioned, it was ultimately upgraded to include what palace staff affectionately call the Jupiter Protocol, a recognition that sometimes the most effective security measures come in unexpected packages, wearing pearls.